It all began with 3 words: wait outside. At Atlanta International Airport, the morning rush buzzed as passengers hurried through the terminal, coffee in hand, phones pressed to ears, but those words would bring the entire gate to a standstill. Captain Danielle Brooks, a black woman with 15 years in the sky, strode toward Gate 14 with the quiet authority that only comes from experience. Her uniform was immaculate, her stride confident, her presence unmistakable. Yet instead of respect, she was met with a wall. Taylor Mayers and her 2 colleagues, Brendan and Courtney, gate agents who seemed less interested in procedure and more intent on doubt. Their eyes lingered not on her captain's wings, but on her skin, her gender, her very existence in a role they refused to accept. "Sure you are," Taylor muttered when Danielle introduced herself as the captain, snickering as she blocked the jetway. Phones lifted from the crowd, red recording lights glowing. Strangers could feel something wasn't right. Danielle remained steady, presenting her ID, stating her role, yet the gate agents laughed it off, waving through her white first officer without even glancing at his credentials. A hush fell as passengers sensed a confrontation brewing. Then the insult sharp as a slap: "If you're really the captain, wait outside until we sort this out." Humiliation in front of hundreds, deliberate and public. Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She stepped aside, not in defeat but in strategy. They thought they had cornered her. They had no idea they had just awakened a storm that would shake the entire industry. Danielle settled 20 feet away near the window, outwardly calm, but her mind moved with precision. To the untrained eye, she looked like she was checking messages, but behind that composed exterior was a woman who had spent her career navigating prejudice, building resilience, and preparing for exactly this kind of moment. She dialed 3 numbers, each more powerful than the last. First, Victoria Chen, the operations director, emergency crew replacement ordered immediately. Then Steven Rodriguez, compliance chief, footage secured before anyone could delete it. Finally, the board chair himself, invoking emergency anti-discrimination protocols written by none other than Danielle herself. Within minutes, Gate 14 transformed into the epicenter of a crisis no one could contain. Passengers whispered, exchanged glances, and held their phones high. Hashtags were born in real time. #wait outside began climbing social media. Taylor still smirked behind the counter, believing she held control. But when Benjamin Harris, airport manager, arrived with urgency in his step, the tide shifted instantly. "Captain Brooks!" His tone changed the room: respect, recognition, authority. Passengers leaned in, sensing the mask slipping from Taylor's face. She tried to backpedal, but the damage was done, and Danielle's composure made the contrast undeniable. Her boarding path cleared, she stepped onto her aircraft, dignity intact. And with every passenger watching, she made one thing clear: this was about far more than her. It was about every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. Inside the cockpit, Danielle's hands moved with steady confidence, flipping switches, running pre-flight checks, her body anchored by years of discipline. Her co-pilot, James Wilson, shook his head in disbelief. "What the hell was that about?" he asked. Danielle didn't flinch, didn't let her anger show. "That was about more than me," she replied, voice even but edged with resolve. Outside, the drama still unfolded. HR directors and executives arrived at the gate, taking notes, reviewing footage. Passengers whispered in the cabin, showing each other videos that were already trending online. "That's our captain," a young woman said, eyes wide. By the time the engines roared to life, thousands of strangers on social media had seen what happened. And as Flight 2187 lifted from the runway, gravity surrendering to thrust, Danielle wasn't just carrying passengers to Chicago. She was carrying a story that would spread across the country before her wheels even touched down. In conference rooms back in Atlanta, executives huddled around screens, the footage playing silently. Taylor's sneer, Danielle's calm, James waved through without a glance. "This is textbook discrimination," compliance declared. "Public, undeniable, viral." The board chair's decision was swift, emergency meeting upon Danielle's return. For years, she had been preparing for this moment. The system had failed her countless times. This time, she would make sure the system itself changed. By the time Danielle's flight touched down in Chicago, the phrase "wait outside" had gone viral nationwide. Passengers deplaned with murmurs of respect, some pausing to thank her for her professionalism. But her phone buzzed nonstop. 47 missed calls, emergency meetings, industry alarms. At Atlanta headquarters, chaos reigned. Executives scrambled as hashtags climbed trends, public outrage boiled, and airlines across the nation braced for fallout. Danielle, still in uniform, walked calmly into the boardroom. But this wasn't just a pilot reporting harassment. This was Director Brooks, a member of the board itself, chair of the Operational Standards Committee. The room shifted when she spoke. She presented not just the morning's humiliation, but years of evidence, complaints buried, biases excused, patterns ignored. "This isn't an isolated incident," she said. "It's systemic, and we already have the solution." She unveiled the Brooks Protocol, a three-step credential verification system designed to remove subjective judgment. No more arbitrary decisions based on who looked like a pilot or didn't. The board vote was unanimous. Effective immediately, the protocol would be company law. Taylor, Brendan, and Courtney's careers were already ashes. They just didn't know yet. For Danielle, this wasn't vengeance. This was justice. Justice for every person pushed aside, mocked, underestimated, simply because someone decided they didn't fit an image. The hammer fell quickly. At the very same gate where Taylor once smirked with power, she now stood stripped of it. HR arrived flanked by security. The announcement was clinical. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." Her smile froze, then cracked as the reality sank in. Brendan and Courtney exchanged desperate glances. Phones rose again, passengers capturing the downfall in real time. "It was just a misunderstanding." Taylor protested, voice rising, but the evidence was undeniable, the videos viral, the intent exposed in her own words. That phrase, "She didn't look like a captain," seared into record. Discrimination wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice, and choices have consequences. Within weeks, Taylor's name circulated on industry blacklists. Job applications bounced back with rejections. Brendan and Courtney, given marginal leniency as followers, faced probation but at least had a chance to rebuild. Taylor, the instigator, found herself radioactive in aviation, her career permanently revoked. Meanwhile, Danielle's face appeared on screens across the industry, not as a victim, but as the architect of reform. Training centers replayed her story, her calm dignity under fire, her systemic solution. The Brooks Protocol spread like wildfire, adopted not just by one airline, but by 23 others within 6 weeks. What began with humiliation at Gate 14 had already reshaped the skies. But change wasn't just about policies on paper. It was about the quiet dignity of everyday moments. At airports across the country, new credential kiosks scanned IDs without bias, verifying with biometrics and schedules, eliminating the human filter that had once let prejudice slip through. A young black woman in training uniform walked confidently through a gate, greeted with courtesy rather than doubt. A Hispanic flight attendant no longer braced for unnecessary checks. A Muslim ground crew member finally passed security without suspicion shadowing him. The numbers proved the difference. Reported bias incidents dropped 64% in the first quarter. Minority employee satisfaction soared for the first time in 8 years. But the deeper change was harder to measure. The relief in shoulders that no longer tensed at every checkpoint. The confidence in voices that no longer hesitated. And yet, Danielle knew this was only the beginning. She had built systems to curb bias, but true equality required vigilance, accountability, persistence. One day at a time, one flight at a time, she didn't just rewrite procedure, she rewrote possibility. 6 months later, Danielle walked again toward Gate 14, the very place her humiliation had sparked a revolution. This time, the agent scanned her credentials swiftly, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Captain Brooks." No hesitation, no doubt. On board, she greeted passengers at the cockpit door, exchanging nods and smiles. Among them was Brendan, no longer in airline uniform, but working for a ground transport company. Their eyes met, recognition sparking a complicated silence. Later, he approached her quietly, apology spilling out. He admitted he had followed Taylor blindly, learned his lesson, taken sensitivity training, and was trying to rebuild. Danielle listened, measured, then softened. The goal was never punishment, she told him. The goal was change. Real change rarely comes with cinematic closure. It comes in quiet acknowledgments, in lessons absorbed, in one man humbling himself enough to apologize, and one woman strong enough to accept it. The plane lifted from the ground, climbing through clouds, and Danielle's thoughts crystallized. Respect isn't something you wait to be given. Sometimes it's something you carve into the system itself so that no one else ever has to wait outside again. By the time the industry adopted the Brooks Protocol, discrimination reports had fallen dramatically, efficiency had improved, and minority retention had climbed higher than ever. For the airline, what began as crisis management became a competitive advantage. For employees, it became a new way forward. And for passengers, it became a lesson that the dignity of those who fly them matters just as much as the mechanics of the aircraft itself. All of it started with one woman refusing to be humiliated, one captain standing her ground not with anger but with unshakable professionalism. Danielle Brooks didn't just win her battle, she changed the system for everyone who came after. And that's the kind of story we tell here. Stories of justice, transformation, and the moments when everything changes. If Danielle's story moved you, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because every week we bring you powerful stories just like this. Stories that prove courage, accountability, and integrity can reshape entire systems. Like this video so more people can discover Captain Brooks's legacy. Share it to spread the message of change, and drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in her shoes? Remember, every time someone refuses to wait outside, progress takes another step forward.